Welcome back to the Battle of the States and Providences. Week 1 is in the books. Pretty much every team has played unless they're in Division 3. Few teams in Division 3 and Division 2 haven't played yet either. Most of them will kick off this week. We will see a few teams that are going to be starting off very far back, and hopefully they can gain the points and get back in there. So in Pod 1, we had South Dakota State and Saskatchewan play this week. South Dakota traveled to Oklahoma State, where they lost 44-20, and Saskatchewan traveled to Manitoba, where they lost 37-24. With both of those losses, Saskatchewan ends up at negative 15 points, and South Dakota State ends up at negative 25. Lenore Ryan and Middlebury both have 0. Going into week 2, only Middlebury will not play again, so they will have 2 weeks to try to get into one of the top 2 spots. South Dakota State looks to bounce back as they welcome Incarnate Ward to Brookings, South Dakota. Lenore Ryan has Bowie State come to town, and Saskatchewan is traveling to Regina. In Pod 2, only Wartburg was off this week. Benedict played in the Black College Hall of Fame Classic, which was played in Canton, Ohio, against Virginia State, where they lost 23-7. St. Francis Xavier traveled to Bishop, where they lost 37-27. And New Hampshire traveled to Orlando, where they faced off against UCF, where they lost 57-3. So with Wartburg not playing yet, they end up at the number 1 slot with 0 points. St. Francis Xavier ends up at negative 12 in number 2. Benedict is at negative 17, and New Hampshire is at negative 55. Going into week 2, only Benedict is off, so they will not be able to try to get some points back. But Wartburg is traveling for their first game to Monmouth, Illinois. St. Francis Xavier has Arcadia come to town, and New Hampshire tries to get out of 4th place as they travel to Holy Cross. Going into Pod 3, only both Harding and Sylvia Regina were off in Week 1. SMU had Theirs had Houston Christian come to town, where they easily beat them 59-7. And Manitoba had Saskatchewan come to town, where they won 37-24. With that win, we will go ahead and kind of look at that. You can kind of see where the difference is in those 2 point totals. You can see how even though you may lose a game, you can still not necessarily have fewer points, or if you win a game, you can easily come out on top. Whereas Saskatchewan had negative 15, but Manitoba had 19. So it's not always give and take as to how many points. It's not always a mirror effect as to how many points you lose and stuff, or gain. Along with that, SMU is able to boost up their point total as they get up to 67.5 points. Manitoba is in second with 19. Harding and Sylvia Regina are both at 0. Going into week 2, everybody in this group is playing. Harding starts their Division 2 national title defense as Southern Nazarene comes to town. SMU looks to continue to stay on top as they have BYU come into Dallas. Sylvia Regina kicks off with a home opener against Curry. And Manitoba is traveling to British Columbia. Going into Pod 4, only Mount Allison did not play, but they had a few points from the previous week. Friends started off their season by defending their home turf with a 64-20 win over St. Mary, Kansas. Boise State traveled down to Georgia, where they faced Georgia Southern, where they came away with a solid victory of 56-45. And Oregon had Idaho come to town, where they struggled a little, and they were able to win 24-14. As you see, Friends with that 52 point with 52.5, they jump out to a strong early lead. Boise State at 16.5. Then you have Oregon coming in third with 15 points, and then Mount Allison with 6.5. Going into week 2, Friends looks to stay on top as they travel to play Ottawa, Kansas. And something unusual that doesn't happen too often in this type of playoff setting. Both Boise State and travels to Oregon as they play against each other. And then the Mounties stay at home as they welcome St. Mary's, Nova Scotia, as they look to hop the loser of the Boise State-Oregon game. Going into Pod 5, Central Missouri was the only team off this week. Montreal traveled to their crosstown rival of McGill, where they continued their dominance with a 47-8 win. Alabama won in an easy fashion as they had Western Kentucky come to town with a 63-0 win. Howard traveled to New Jersey to face Rutgers, where they lost 44-7. With those two strong wins, Montreal stays on top pretty easily with 82 points. Alabama, with a solid showing, has 68 points. Central Missouri's right now sitting in third with 0. And then Howard is right now coming in fourth with negative 38 points. Week 2 has Montreal is on the road again as they travel to face Laval. Alabama looks to make up ground on Montreal as they stay at home to face South Florida. Central Missouri kicks off their season with a home opener against future conference foe Northeastern State. And then Howard is looking to get back on their feet. As they have their home opener against Maryhurst. Going into Pod 6, we saw all teams play this week with Hawaii hoping to push their lead. Oklahoma had Temple come to Norman, where they won easily, 51-3. Michigan had Fresno State come to town, where they were able to win 30-10. Hawaii had UCLA come out to the island, where they lost 13-16. And Notre Dame had a tough road test in the week 1 as they traveled to Texas A&M and won 23-13. With those scores, Oklahoma comes out on top in week 1 with 53 points. Michigan in second with 25. Hawaii with 21.5. And Notre Dame coming in fourth place with 15.5. Going into Pod 7, Aurora and UW-Whitewater were off. But Delaware had Bryant come to Newark, where they were able to win 48-17, and British Columbia had Alberta come to town and lost 28-42. Delaware is able to be at the top spot this week. They have 37 points. Aurora and UW-Whitewater are both tied for second with 0. And then British Columbia is in last with negative 16.5 points. In week 2, Delaware will be off this week, hoping nobody jumps them. Aurora kicks off their season on the road as they travel to Iowa to face DeQ. UW-Whitewater kicks off their season as they welcome John Carroll to Perkins Stadium. And British Columbia has Manitoba come out to Vancouver. Going into week 1 for pod number 8, only Mountain Union did not play this week. Western Ontario continued their dominance as they beat Waterloo 71-3. Delta State started off their season with a road win over Mars Hill 47-16. And Wyoming traveled down to Tempe, Arizona, where they lost 7-48 to Arizona State. After week 1, Western Ontario is on top with 107 points. That's going to be a pretty tough score to beat out. The 3 remaining teams are kind of hoping they may slip up. But really, this is almost, even after 2 weeks, this has kind of come down to who is going to get in second place unless something happens to Western Ontario. Delta State comes in second with 36.5 points. Mount Union with 0. And then Wyoming is 78 points back from the second place spot with negative 42. Going into week 2, everybody is playing, whereas Western Ontario hopes to continue their winning streak as they welcome Carleton to town. Delta State opens up at home as they welcome Missouri S&T to Cleveland, Mississippi. Mount Union opens up their season on the road as they travel to face Furman. And then Wyoming hopes to get back on track as they welcome the Idaho Vols to Laramie. Going into Pod 9, only Monmouth, New Jersey played this week. They traveled to face Eastern Washington, where they lost 27 to 42. With that loss, they are officially in 4th place, with everybody else having 0 points. Week 2, everybody's going to be kicking off. Colorado Mines opens up their season as they welcome West Texas A&M to Golden, Colorado. Trinity, Connecticut opens up their season at home as well as they welcome Colby College. St. John's, Minnesota opens up at home as they face Carthage, and Monmouth hopes to get back on track as they open up against Lafayette. Going into Pod 10, only North Central Illinois did not play. But Charleston, West Virginia started off their season traveling to Livingston, where they won 38 to 7. North Dakota State traveled to Boulder, where they faced Colorado and lost 26 to 31. And then Southern Utah traveled to Salt Lake City, where they lost to Utah 0 to 49. With their win, Charleston, West Virginia gets out on top with 36.5. North Dakota State ends up in 3rd with -6, and Southern Utah ends up in 4th with -50. Going into week 2, everybody's going to be playing. Charleston, West Virginia hopes to add to their lead as they welcome California, Pennsylvania to town. North Central Illinois is actually off again this week. Sorry, I misspoke. They will hope for 2 solid victories in order to move into the next round. North Dakota State welcomes Tennessee State to the Fargo Dome for their home opener. And Southern Utah travels to face another FBS opponent in UTEP. Going into Pod 11, where only LSU played. They played a tough game as they went to Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Kickoff Classic, where they lost 20 to 27 to USC. With that loss, they start off in 4th place. In week 2, everybody is going to be kicking off. Claremont Mud Scripps opens the season at home as they welcome Chicago to town. Kaiser kicks off their NAIA title defense as they travel to Tigerville, South Carolina, and face Division III North Greenville. Ottawa, Arizona welcomes Texas Wesleyan to surprise Arizona for their first game of the season. And LSU is hoping to get their season back on track as they welcome Nichols to Tiger Stadium. Sorry, got myself confused for a minute. Only Wayne State, Nebraska played this week. They welcome Missouri S&T to town and won 49 to 17. With that win, they start off with 37 points over everybody. In week 2, everybody's playing with Wayne State traveling to MSU Moorhead for their first Northern Sun Conference game. Edith opens their season traveling to face off against St. Lawrence. Johns Hopkins starts their 2024 campaign traveling to New York to face off against Ithaca. And Randolph-Macon kicks off their season at Dickerson College in Pennsylvania. Pod 13, only Houston did not play this week. Washington started off their season welcoming Weber State to Husky Stadium, where they won 35 to 3. Georgia traveled to Atlanta to play in the Aflac kickoff game against Clemson, where they won pretty easily 34 to 3. Pikeville opened the season at home against Campbellsville, where they lost in a close one, 33-34. Washington starts off with a 1-point lead over Georgia. Houston, of course, is in third with 0 points, and then Pikeville is at -2.5, so it's a pretty tight ball game. Going into week 2, Washington stays at home as they welcome Eastern Michigan to town. Georgia comes home to Athens, where they welcome Tennessee Tech for their home opener. Houston opens up the season at home against Farmingham State. And Pikeville stays at home as well as they welcome Georgetown, Kentucky to Pikeville. Pod 14, only Cortland State did not play this week. UNLV traveled to Houston, where they won 27-7. New Mexico State opened the season at home, where they beat Southeast Missouri 23-16. And Montana welcomed Missouri State to town, where they won a tight one, 29-24. With all those wins, UNLV is on top with a 25.5 point total. New Mexico State comes right behind them with 12. Montana with 10, and of course Cortland State with 0. Week 2, UNLV has their first home game where they welcome Utah Tech to town. New Mexico State stays at home as they play their first USA game against last year's champion Liberty. Montana travels to Grand Forks, North Dakota to face off against North Dakota. And Cortland State opens up the season on the road where they will start defending their D3 national title against Hilbert. Pod 15 saw only Northwestern and Iowa not play. Penn State traveled to Morgantown where they faced West Virginia in a very wet game, but they were able to come out 34-12 with a victory. Alberta traveled to British Columbia where they won 42-28. Bethel, Tennessee welcomed Point to town where they won 20-6. With that win over West Virginia, Penn State has a 2-point lead over Alberta. Penn State has 27.5 points. Alberta has 25.5. Bethel, Tennessee comes in third with 19, and then Northwestern Iowa at 0. Going into week 2, UNLV has their first home game. That's the wrong pod. Penn State starts their home slate of games as they welcome Bowling Green to Beaver Stadium. Alberta stays home this week as they will welcome Calgary to Edmonton for their first home game. Bethel, Tennessee stays at home this week where they face Mary Hardin Baylor. Northwestern Iowa opens up their season on the road as they travel to face off against Hastings for a Great Plains Conference game. All the numbers you see next to teams are their rankings in the current polls for their different divisions they are in. I use the AP poll for FBS. I will be using AP poll throughout the year. I'll put the college football playoff when those start coming out in brackets. For FCS, D2, and D3, I use the coaches polls. NAI is also head coaching polls, and the U Sports is the overall polls rankings. I can easily provide those for anybody who wants to see them and kind of get a glimpse of them. Again, I hope you enjoy these videos. I enjoy doing them. And as always, let's root on our favorite teams and let's have fun. See you next week, everybody. Bye.